All right, hello, and welcome to my 10-minute assignment 5 walkthrough. Super excited about this topic. As I realized, I mentioned this in a couple of assignments. I think that I've been working with generative AI to come up with help with assignment topics or ideas and whatnot. And so for this, we actually went back and forth a number of different times where we originally wanted me to still work with the weather APIs, and there was a couple others that it was pulling through, and I just pushed it a little bit harder to say, like, I just doesn't interest me at all, and I really want to find something that does. And so when I saw this come up, I was really not only excited, but quite surprised actually that I can, and that the public can, tap into all of the data that we're about to walk through in just a second. And so for this assignment, we'll be tapping into SpaceX API. So this is a public API with no keys needed, totally free. And again, as I was pushing generative AI, when it came back and said, hey, do you want to look at rocket launches by date? I said, sure, that sounds like a lot of fun. So that is what we will be looking at today. We're going to tie a few of the different methods and methodologies together that we've learned, including the new stuff. So we'll look at pandas, we'll look at Plotly, using Dash at the end, which again, I think is really exciting about this assignment. I think the dashboard, interactive, very useful, and also just a lot of fun, even with the topic that we're going to talk about today. So why all this stuff matters. This is the real world. We don't get nice, pretty Excel files and CSVs and all this kind of stuff. We're going to have to fetch through what we've now learned this semester through APIs. So great. We're going to have to shape it. We're going to have to visualize it. We're going to have to use some interactivity, hopefully with Dash. So tying, again, all these different concepts together, but as we'll see at the very end, something very useful and also something very exciting. So interactive table of contents, again, to get us started, to import and get us started on kind of importing on the same page. So just want to make sure that we have all the right environments. We're using Plotly and Dash. If your versions differ, it's still going to work most likely, but through the research I've done with this and through generative AI, it's recommending Dash 2.16. So you can see here I'm running 3.2, so I'm doing just fine. Everything's up and running and ready to go. So next, on to the imports and what we're calling the small helper. So we're going to fetch, first we're going to import the requests, the pandas. We're going to define in the middle here, this JSON that we're defining is our little helper. It raises the HTTP error, raises any HTTP errors. So it's just helping us look for anything that's not going right. SpaceX also has separate endpoints for launches and rockets. So as you'll see here in the API base, we're going to fetch the data for both. Last, in this area of code, we have a small success label function to turn Booleans into success or failure for plotting. This is going to be important, as we'll see in just a second. So we're going to use 0 for failure, 1 for success. And again, that'll come back up in just a moment. So all the fun code. I'm so grateful for generative AI again. We talked to each other through this and actually didn't have to go back and forth all that much, which was really great. So we're going to call the launches and the rockets JSONs. In this code, we built a data rocket map so we can translate each launch's rocket ID into a human readable name. So then we normalize. So that's what's happening here is we're normalizing, or we're creating the name. And then now we're going to normalize the launches into a data frame. We're going to parse that into a couple of different places. So we're going to parse it into date. We're going to derive the year. We're going to map the rocket name. And then again, we're going to mark success for 0, 1. So we can compute any of the totals that we're going to need very cleanly in a minute. And now we have the output of all of this is that we have rows, rocket names, and time span that we're about to explore. So we already have the data parsed into the date and time, or the year time frame. We've mapped our rocket IDs to rocket names, and then we've converted success into outcome labels, so 0s or 1s. And now we're going to take a look and do some exploratory data analysis. So first up on Plotly is launches by year. We can see they started in 2006. We already know from Plotly that we can hover over and see what was going on. They had one launch that year. 62 by 2022, so you can see exponentially we're going up. So just a really great way to visualize and take a look at what's going on by year. To keep going, there are 3 different rockets, as I mentioned earlier. We're pulling in different rocket names. So Falcon 1 has a 40% success rate. It only had 5 launches total. Falcon 5 is a little bit better than that, 60% success rate, again with 5 launches. And then Falcon 9, obviously way, way better. We can see that from the data anyway, over 90% success rate with 195 launches. And so I think both of these ways to visualize the data were really cool, because you can just kind of generally look and see one of the rockets is doing better than the others, right, significantly. Or if I go back up, you can see the program significantly took off in, probably 2014, 2015 and on. So just a clean way of looking at this quickly and kind of seeing what's going on with the API data, the real life stuff that we actually are taking from SpaceX right now. So cool. So to continue on to the next part, which again, I think is so cool, because as an end user, why I think it's so cool is because it's so useful and it's so helpful to see this, to understand it, and to truly visualize what's going on. But also, I'm just going to roll through this really quick from a code perspective. There is absolutely no way that I would have been sitting here having this presentation done right now if I was expected to write this code all on my own. And if you see this, there's callbacks in here, there's inputs, there's outputs, everything that we have been talking about throughout the semester, including this next part of Dash, is in here. And what I think is so great is that I actually did this on my own with generative AI as my helper buddy, and this code works great. And so what we've done here is created essentially the same information, except that we have a dropdown for all rockets. We can filter by a single rocket. Falcon 1, we already saw that. We knew it had a 40% success rate with 5 launches. And so we have the green are the 2 successes. The red, obviously, are the 3 failures. So that lines up with our earlier data. Falcon 9, we knew they had a couple of failures. Or I'm sorry, Falcon Heavy, we knew they also didn't have very many. They had 3 succeeded and 0 failed with 5 launches. And I love this interactive map too, because not only can I can hover over and kind of take a look at what's going on, but I can also see at the bottom there's 195 launches that happened, 176 of them succeeded, 2 failed. Again, super helpful. I can see so many applications for this kind of stuff in the environment. But what I love is generative AI, and I even came up with, the color coding is really helpful, because you can immediately see green is success, red is failure. Patterns become very, very obvious. And if inline rendering isn't supported in your environment, in the code up above, there's a commented one-liner to run the app in a local browser instead. So I love that it came up with a couple of different fail safes just in case. Okay, so taking us home. To recap what we did, we pulled live data from a public API, we shared it with pandas, we visualized it with Plotly, we added the interactivity with Dash, super cool. Dash was modules 9 and 10, getting back into one notebook. And then as next steps, we could also consider adding date range sliders, we could add launch sites as a second filter, we could export the Dash app to run as a standalone service if we wanted to. All sorts of fun stuff. Love getting to play around with rockets and rocket launches. And thanks for listening.